Morning, everyone. As I said earlier, welcome to the ATA meeting for January 2023. Happy New Year, everyone. Couple of housekeeping items. First, the webinar is being recorded, so we can post it, I believe, on our YouTube page for people to look at later on, along with the slides. Second, all the attendees are muted. If you have a question, please use the question box. We'll be monitoring that and try to answer things as we go along. So with that, I'd like to get started. The agenda for today, we're going to do a review of the longitudinal system assessment, some of the data and error issues that we had. Go through some things on the housing inventory count and the point in time count, which are happening starting this week. A quick update on the 2024 HUD HMIS data standards. Some updates on training and licensing for new users. The ATA liaison to the HMIS committee. Update on data quality. A little bit about agency participation agreements and some items on future meetings of this group. So the review of the LSA data issues. So the longitudinal systems analysis is something that All Chicago's HMIS lead is required to process and upload to HUD every year. The process starts in November and terminated on the 11th or 12th of this month. And it's basically a validation check on what's happening in the HMIS. So for the fiscal year 2022, after a lot of work, we identified errors related mostly to project entry data and inventory discrepancies for utilization. We won't spend, well, we'll spend a little bit of time on it anyway, but some of these things have to do with data entry or configuration things that we wanted to make all the agencies aware of and see if there's ways we can improve on this for next year. We may be looking at other kinds of reporting during the year to try to identify these, as opposed to trying to correct many errors on a compressed timeline when the LSA starts. So this may be part of some ongoing reporting and things that we take a look at. So the first category was client location errors. And basically, these got flagged because either when the client was created, their location, which is IL 510 for our COC, either wasn't entered, or the enrollment had no head of household, since it's flagged for head of household only. So for this particular one, if there's any reinforcing training we need to do with case managers or people doing data entry to make sure that the enrollment has a head of household and the head of household's client location is filled in, that's what we'll be taking a look at. In addition to those, there were errors regarding heads of household, where for some enrollments and the associated households, either the enrollment had no head of household or it had more than one head of household. And so those are, again, those are areas I think we need to focus on. There were a number of those kinds of things happening that can be fairly easily identified during data entry and during normal client maintenance. But again, we're looking at seeing what kinds of reports we can generate to identify these kinds of errors and data discrepancies prior to actually operating the LSA. The next category is inventory errors. And these took a number of different forms, either things that are in the HMIS that did not match up with what we had reported in last year's housing inventory count, or things that were inconsistent between what the inventory was set up on as what it set up as and what the actual enrollments indicate. So the first category is there were 7 projects that had chronically homeless dedicated beds that were not PSH projects. So we went through and corrected some of these things, but in general, both for the HIC and for the LSA, we still have some work to do to make sure that inventories are set up correctly for each project. The other part was in project inventories, there's a household type in the HMIS that indicates whether it's for households with only adults, households with adults and children, and households that are only children. And one of the things the LSA looks at is what household types do you have defined as inventories for your project, and then who's actually enrolling in your project. And if it turns out that your inventory is all set up for households with only adults, and the households actually look like adults and children in who enrolls, it flags those things as being warnings and things that need explanation. So again, this is an area that we will be reviewing as part of the HIC also with some of the survey stuff, and we'll be getting to that in a few minutes here. The other categories we found with these kinds of errors where projects are no longer operational, and we're again doing some reporting internally and following up with agencies to make sure that we flag projects that aren't useful. Yeah, Ken, I'm seeing the question there. PSH, permanent supportive housing. So in the program types that HUD defines, PSH is permanent supportive housing with disability required. So sorry, I didn't see. I'm trying not to. In several things on the slides here, I'm trying to make sure that we explain what all the acronyms are. So thanks for asking that question. So as I was mentioning, following up to make sure that non-operational projects are flagged as such that so they're not included in the HUD reporting that we do. And as I also mentioned earlier, the household type being whether it has adults and children or only adults or things like that, we want to make sure that that's configured correctly. Another area that the longitudinal system assessment flags is clients with overlapping enrollments, particularly with respect to permanent housing. In a few instances, what we found were that the project, an agency would have a project type for services and one for permanent housing, but they were both designated as being permanent supportive housing where people are actually enrolling in the project. At other times, there are duplicate enrollments in the same project twice. Clients who hadn't been exited from a prior permanent housing project, things like that. So again, we're looking at what kind of reporting we can do over the course of the year, so we're not trying to correct all these errors on the fly during the PSH reporting period. And I know Alex was interacting with several of you to resolve a lot of the errors that we've discussed, and I appreciate your help and cooperation in figuring out what to do about those things. So overall, our final upload to HUD for the LSA resulted in a handful of warnings that we need to follow up with further explanation. And one of the household, actually one household error with 6 instances that we weren't able to resolve. But overall, it went fairly well. And the main thing we want to do is reduce the fire drill nature of processing this and have a more ongoing identification and correction of errors, so that when we run the LSA, it's pretty much just running it and dealing with anything that has cropped up since the last time we did any reporting on it. So we'll be updating you on what that looks like and what kinds of reports are available through business objects to help everyone identify those and keep the data as clean as possible in the system. Are there any other questions about the LSA before we move on to the next topic? Okay. So for the housing inventory count, that process started this week. Alex held a webinar yesterday going through some things for the point in time count and the HIC. What we're doing is, like in prior years, asking each agency to fill out a survey for the housing inventory count. As part of this, all the permanent housing projects will be able to generate a utilization report from business objects for the night of January 26th, which is when the pit count is happening. And we ask that you run those and confirm the reports are accurate. And the accuracy would be either that your inventory is not correct in the HMIS system, or that what it's showing for enrollments on the night of the 26th is not correct for some reason. So please run that and then complete the HIC survey. For shelter, transitional housing, and safe haven projects, please complete the HIC survey starting this week. And as noted, although those projects were excluded from the survey process last year, in order to make sure that we're providing complete information, we would like everybody who has permanent housing projects, shelter, transitional, or safe haven to complete the survey for each one of your projects that falls into one of those categories. And if you don't use the HMIS, there's a survey to report occupancy and vacancy on the night of January 26th, similar to what was done in recent years, that we'd also like to have completed, just so the counts are complete and correct. So the survey's been updated a little bit, and it has 10 sections in total, and it has conditional logic. So you only have to answer the questions that are pertinent to your project type. So the first section is project information. Second is inventory and development. Third is project type, then target population, units and beds. Shelter beds only for emergency shelter projects. Permanent housing dedicated beds only for permanent housing project types. Whether you're participating in the HMIS, and the night of January 26, 2023 for permanent housing, the enrollments there. One note that I would make is that the HMIS definition of units may be different from how you physically think of how many buildings or rooms or things like that you have as units. Just keep in mind as you're filling out the survey that a unit is basically what a household checks into. So in the case of, if you're providing single adult beds, each bed is a unit. And I know that that can get kind of complicated when you have different configurations you can provide and things like that. So if it's not all single beds and things like that, you just need to make sure the units reflects the the most accurate way to do it so that your utilization is on a unit basis isn't um, extraordinarily under or over 100%, because HUD starts looking at those things. It's like 85 to 105% or something like that. So just be aware that the HMIS definition of units is probably different from how you're looking at what your unit population is from a physical layout perspective. So the housing inventory count survey, so there's several help desk articles which provide summary and project ID as it is in the HMIS. So to log in, you provide your HMIS project ID as the username and password. And it needs to be entered exactly as it is in the housing inventory count reference table, which is in the help desk article. And the resource links are there, including the URL for the survey itself and the different help desk articles. So 2 questions, sorry, on the inventory. So on the second question, if I have 30 beds for single adult males, I will have 30 units. The answer to that is correct, is yes. And for Eve's question, I said each unit is a bed, but do you mean that each room space is a unit and each bed is a bed? So it depends. So if you're generally providing, if your households are generally single adults, then each bed is a unit. If you're providing beds for multi-client households, then each bed would not necessarily be a unit in that case. So we can, as we go through each project's inventory, we can answer these questions in more detail, because it may vary project by project. But again, the idea that a room, that's the difference, is a room or space that you would consider to be a unit isn't necessarily what the household is checking into. So if you have a space with 10 single adult beds, that's 10 units from an HMIS perspective, not 1 unit with 10 beds. Other questions on that? We went past, oops. Yeah, we went past the unit and bed thing. So there's other questions I'm happy to answer them now before we get too far. Too far off. So the utilization report can be run anytime you want. It's basically an on-demand kind of thing. So yes, excellent question. The utilization report is available to run on demand whenever you like to. So you don't have to wait for the 26th. But the numbers on the 26th are what's being used for the point in time count and the HIC utilization. Other questions? what is the business objects pathway to utilization report? We will, I believe it's in the help desk articles. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we can get you that. We'll send that out. And again, there should be a help desk article about the utilization report that we can provide also. I will send it to this group before the end of the day today. Just making notes on all the things that that everybody would like to get. I'm just waiting for other questions. So the schedule for the housing inventory count, the webinar was held yesterday, and that was the first day of the HIC survey being open. Also, yesterday, the permanent housing and non-participating projects should be completing their HIC survey. And it will close on, the survey will close on February 3rd. So for the point in time count, for emergency shelters, we're asking that any agency that operates emergency shelters and utilizes Shelter Point to make sure that the Shelter Point lists reflecting clients checked in for that night are updated before 11:59 p.m. on this Thursday. And so making sure that they're correct and updated means checking in clients that are new, make sure everybody that is there on the 26th is in, and anybody who is not there gets exited from the project so that the Shelter Point counts are accurate as of the end of the day on the 26th. As for transitional housing or safe haven, any of those project types should have their entry-exit enrollments are accurate on the day of the point in time count, which is the 26th. So that means clients that you want to have included have an enrollment start date prior to or on Thursday the 26th, and clients that are no longer enrolled in the project should have an exit date also prior to the 26th, so they're not counted, to make sure that the utilization is correct. So Sandra has a question about, two questions about the survey not specifying the HUD type. So yes, if you're a transitional housing project from a HUD definition and that's the basis for your funding and things like that, then yes. But we'll take a look at the survey. I thought that the survey was using, oh, I'm sorry. So the survey didn't specify that you should use the HUD type. Okay, got it. So for transitional and safe haven, the Shelter Point list will no longer be used, but will report based solely on enrollments. So that's why it's important for those two project types to make sure all the enrollments are correct and updated prior to Thursday. So in terms of the schedule for the point in time count, Thursday is the pit date. So emergency shelter projects must ensure the clients enrolled and occupying a bed are the only clients that are in shelter point. Transitional housing and safe haven must ensure that clients are enrolled who are there and the ones no longer the project are exited. Please ensure that demographic data is complete in the entry assessment for clients being counted during the point in time count. And the deadline for all that is that they need to be enrolled. The enrollment date needs to be on January 26th prior to 11:59 p.m. in order for them to be counted for the point in time count. So providers have access to run the PIT business objects report to identify clients who are checked into your shelter list. So here's a link that I'll just make sure we provide that link for generating, interpreting the shelter list and project list for the 26th, the utilization report. On Monday of next week, we'll be posting the cumulative project results at that link, which we'll also provide. These slides will be available with the links in them, but we'll also give you a second piece of it. There's a question from Venetia about the PIT tally sheet and the survey link for programs. So the survey link is here, and again, I'll include that. All of these links I'll put in a separate sheet and send to everyone. The PIT tally sheet, I believe, comes from DFSS, but I can confirm that. But I would think that that has already been distributed, but I'll double check on that. Also on Monday, that's the first round. That's when the first round of corrections starts. So we're encouraging anyone to correct any missing data fields that are identified in that report. On February 6th, the following week, we'll rerun the PIT report and repost the cumulative project results. And again, please look at that list and make sure that the counts are correct. And then Friday of that week, basically the PIT process comes to an end. And by that time, you should have all of your data corrected. So basically the PIT process starts this week with the PIT date on the 26th. There will be preliminary results generated next Monday. The correction period starts next Monday. The following Monday, we'll run the final results. We'll run the updated results. There will be a second correction period during the week of February 6th, and then we'll finalize the results on the 10th. And here are the other links. And again, I'll distribute these slides as quickly as possible after the meeting, which has the links for generating, interpreting the point in time count business objects report and some of the other reports as well. For anything that we don't have in these links, like the tally sheet and other things, we'll get those and add them in as a supplemental set of links. Other questions about housing inventory count or point in time count? Okay. This slide is from the HMIS lead webinar that happened last week, which basically is updating the timeline, or at least an ideal timeline for the new data standards that go into effect on October 1st of this year. And basically what they're hoping for is that by April, they will be releasing the data standards materials to the vendors, including WellSky, who's our vendor. And then in May, those data standards updates will be available on the HUD Exchange, basically available to the public. And the time between April and May and September is when they're hoping all the vendors will complete their work and make sandboxes and test sites available to communities. And then the data standards go into effect on October 1st. And SAGE would be uploaded to accept the 2024 annual performance reports, CAPER and CE annual performance reports at that same time. So the only things that I've heard, Sal has a question about, do they provide any hints as to what may be changing? And I can provide some of the prior stuff that we've done in ATA meetings. The two things I'm aware of are that they are looking at making other demographic categories multi-select and potentially changing some of the demographic things, particularly around aging and ethnicity. They may be combining ethnicity and race as different selections than what's currently there. The other proposal that they disclosed is whether to continue to require or have at all the Social Security number in the HMIS. Other than that, they have not identified anything to my knowledge in terms of what other things may be changing. So a little bit of a heads up in terms of what this means for our HMIS. As part of the data standards update, vendors and WellSky specifically release new versions. Sorry, I'll stop with that. Yes, as I understand how the client unique ID is generated, that would affect it. And WellSky hasn't said anything about how they would deal with that. But again, that was a proposed change. There's not anything final about that. Again, that was just on a list of things they were considering. So I don't know that that's been firmly decided yet. So in terms of the effect on the system, that means that WellSky would be releasing new versions of all of the standard HUD assessments for entry, update, exit, client demographic information and things like that. And so that entails some work on our part to update all of those things. And we'll be reviewing potential changes to naming conventions for the assessments. I'm hoping that we can find ways to make how we name them be a little clearer to users about which ones they need to complete and in what sequence. I think it's an opportunity to look into whether we make some fields required, which makes some of the data quality stuff easier to deal with. So just a heads up that over the course of the summer, since it's both a requirement, it also is an opportunity for us to look at how assessments are structured, what the most effective way is to both manage the assessments and make sure that we're making it clear which ones need to be completed, and potentially an opportunity to overall improve data quality with the way that we implement any of the assessment changes. So we'll be looking for input from this group on that. So as you think about how the system operates and things like that, any ideas that you have about what would make it easier for users, or what the impact would be if we started requiring some fields and things like that, so we don't, there's as few unintended consequences of doing that kind of thing as possible. Any other questions on data standards changes? Yeah, so I'm anticipating that toward the end of the summer, this is going to be occupying, if not 100%, as close as possible to 100% of our time to get that all updated and deployed in time for October. So new user training and licensing. So basically, if anyone is unfamiliar with it, the standard training for a new user is to take an introduction to HMIS training, then project type, specific training for the project types that they're doing case management for. So those are the two, generally speaking, two training videos that people need to watch. Is the last slide. So Kayla, you mean this slide? No, this has to do with every 2 years, the Department of Housing and Urban Development revises the data definitions, the data standards, the specifications that all vendors must follow in the HMIS that's provided and what the HMIS looks like. So the last change was in 2022. So there's a change scheduled for this year. And so this is the timeline for making that update to what the data definitions are, the data standards are for the HMIS. So on the new user training and licensing, there's, generally speaking, people take 2 classes, the intro and the training that is project type specific for permanent housing or shelter or that sort of thing. There's a proctored session where we make sure the user has absorbed the training and can operate on the system. And then the user account is created and the license is assigned. So that's the basic process. It used to be that anybody could sign up to the learning management system, the LMS, and take the intro class. We found that wasn't working great because people were signing up for the class even though their agencies weren't actually using the HMIS. And just a lot of confusion regarding that. So we've made it so that every class needs to be assigned to a user. So it gives us a little bit more control over that. And we're also finding at the help desk that we're getting requests from bunches of different people about being set up as a user and things. One of the things we like to talk about is receiving new user requests only from ATAs or from some other individuals designated in each agency, so we don't have lots of disconnected emails coming in from individual users that we have to scurry around and figure out what's going on with that. So that's a conversation we'd like to have and get some input on, but hopefully involving agency technical administrators in that process a little bit more potentially than they might be now. And the other item is that some users are having difficulty completing the proctored sessions successfully. And again, we'd like to coordinate that with the ATAs so that if they need assistance, if they need other supplemental information from the agency or things like that, that we're able to complete it more successfully. So Sarah has a question: what's the process for assigning the intro course? Do ATAs need to submit a help desk ticket so new staff can access that? And as Rochelle has responded, yes. That's the change that we'd like, that we've been trying to make, and I just want to publicize that's the direction that we're trying to go in, so that we know that, you know, within an agency somebody has whoever is designated by that agency is the source for saying, I have a new user, let's get them set up to take these classes, and just have a more coordinated process for onboarding any new user onto the HMIS. Other questions about this? Okay, lots of questions. So for the first question, Rochelle has answered that, can we assign both the intro and the project specific at the same time? Yes. Who to contact for users to get access? The help desk. And there's two questions about credit balance updates and do away with the cost. So I believe that it's possible to purchase credits directly on the site through PayPal. I don't know if that's what you mean by credit balance updates. Or if you're asking whether you want to know how many credits you currently have. And then the second question is, will we do away with the cost, which is this whole credit thing? And we'll get into that a little bit more, not a lot, but a little bit more on the next couple of slides. There's, Melissa, yes, we all, okay, so let me do one set of questions at a time. So due to the community putting together some additional governance infrastructure regarding us as the HMIS lead and how things are done and who can authorize things to be done and things like that. We are reviewing how the learning management system works and things like that, but we're not in a position to unilaterally say we're going to do away with the cost. So that's the answer to that in terms of us getting rid of the cost. And beyond that, I mean, it's one of the things that we'll bring up with that governance structure. But beyond that, I don't have an answer for that question. The slides are both posted at the HMIS, sorry, the ATA meeting website. And yes, typically I send the slides out to everybody who attended. And Catherine has a question going back to the proctored session piece. To what extent should we be helping users with the proctored sessions? And it feels like you're doing it for them. Couple things. One is one of the things that we've discussed internally is since we don't have visibility into the processes for processing clients and doing any of the inbound processing for a client, it's hard to know what kind of data gets collected and in what form and then gets translated into doing data entry to the HMIS. That may be an area where we can collaborate a little more in terms of, do our proctored sessions reflect real world and are they understandable enough in the context of how case managers are really working to make those proctored sessions go a little easier. As to what else you can be doing, I don't want to take up everybody's time on this, but I know Rochelle is on and she's our training coordinator, and if there's anything you'd like to add either in the answer box or things like that, Rochelle, feel free to do that. And then will in-person be an option again? I won't rule it out. We are not back in our office yet. So that I anticipate that's going to happen sometime during this year, but so that limits some of our in-person options. But and again, that's something we may have to discuss with the HMIS committee, but that's certainly something we can explore and look into. Is there a process to purchase credits posted anywhere and help by an invoice to have our finance department buy credits? Sandra, let me talk to our finance folks and see how they handle that. Like I said, I believe it's possible to, the two avenues I'm familiar with are some sort of an invoice process from our finance group and accounting group to bill for it, and then the other option is to purchase them like using a credit card and PayPal or a PayPal account. Yeah, there's an invoice thing that comes from PayPal also. So contact the help desk on that to work through that process. Did I miss any questions here? Okay. Other questions? Okay. So part of the governance structure that I was talking about is that there's been an HMIS committee formed by the COC board. And as part of that governance, the HMIS committee is there to oversee the HMIS lead, which is all Chicago. Membership on that committee is drawn from a number of constituencies in the community. And they've also identified that they'd like to have a liaison to this group of agency technical administrators. Sal Munoz is representing Franciscan Outreach on the HMIS committee. And at their last meeting, they also selected him to be the HMIS committee liaison to ATAs. But since it's a new thing, it's they want to make sure that both there's good representation and nobody's getting overloaded. So they'd also have to have a backup liaison from the agency technical administrators to the HMIS committee. So if you're interested in performing that role, please let, I haven't talked to Sal about this, so I apologize for volunteering you, Sal, and I can take you off. But if you want to contact Sal or me to let us know, and we'll pass that on to the HMIS committee. Sorry about the typo. So Joy, is your question how you get on that to represent a constituency other than the agency technical administrators? Sal, do you have any yeah, I know that they're again, they have different yeah, right. So the meetings are open to the public as all COC meetings are. As a participating member, again, I know that they have different constituencies and different interest groups they're trying to make sure they have representation on. So Joy, I can get you a name for who to contact as far as membership. Other questions? So data quality, the things that we're working on in terms of the data quality process to try to improve it and also increase participation levels. Want to make sure that the utilization reporting is completely up to date and accurate. Increase automation, reduce the labor intensity. There's a lot of files floating around and things like that, and I'm trying to streamline that so that it's more automated and more efficient. And to update the process so that we're generating data for all projects and agencies, so we don't have nearly as many flagged as not participating because somebody didn't send a file into us. I mean, we have all the data, things like that, so it's possible to do that. So the target is to resume this next month. The LSA, the longitudinal system analysis, the system performance measure is due at the end of next month, and the PIT and the HIC is an awful lot to do within a couple of month time frame. So that's where we're targeting next month to resume the data quality process, and hopefully it will be, you know, you'll get information, ability to correct data and things like that. But otherwise, the actual production of the reports and things will be more automated at our end. And I see Sal's posted a response, and I couldn't remember the phrase about the affinity groups. So thanks, Sal, for reminding me what those things are called. Any questions on data quality? Agency participation agreements, they're required from each agency in order to use the HMIS, and we renew them annually. So those will be going out to each agency this week. If there's just identifying a person to sign the agreement in agency, we may be contacting you for assistance to identify that person, but or if the people that we've identified are no longer in that position, the same thing may apply. But for right now, we have a pretty decent list of who to send that to, so that will be going out during the week this week. So that's more of a heads up. And then future meetings, the goal for this year is to hold an ATA meeting every 2 months. So we'll schedule the next meeting for March. If there are items you'd like to see on future agendas, please let me know. And a possible recurring agenda item, just to make this meeting more useful and meaningful for you folks in terms of any kind of collaboration or information sharing about what works or doesn't work in your agency. If there is such a thing, again, sorry about the typo. If there's something in your agency that works well in the HMIS that you'd like to share with the group, or any other topic that you'd like to share with the group, we can certainly make room on the agenda for participation by the agency technical administrators yourselves. So completely open to that. Eric is asking when the recording will be made available. It takes a while for GoToMeeting to make it available, then we need to copy it over. But we'll make it available as soon as possible, usually within the next day or so. So again, if you have any topics you'd like to share with the group, please email me and let me know, and we can make room on the agenda for that. And amazingly, with 1 minute to spare, that's the end of our content for this meeting. Any other questions or items? And if not, thank you all for attending. We'll get the links out as soon as possible during the day today on the HIC and point in time count, and make the slides available also. If not, thank you all again for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.